Alrighty, this lesson is on solving literal equations. So what is a literal equation? It's an equation that involves two or more variables. So any equation that has two or more variables we call a literal equation. So it could have numbers in it, all right? It is possible that it has numbers. Most of the ones that you're going to see today do not have numbers in there. So this first one, this one's kind of easy. It says solve for v. So I'm trying to get the v by itself here. So that means I want to get rid of the r. So any thoughts on how we get rid of the r, Grace? That's exactly right. To get rid of this r, this is divided by r. So we just multiply both sides by r. These r's will cross simplify to 1 and 1 because they're identical, they're the same thing. And so what I end up with is rs equals v. And then all you need to do is flip that around and write v equals rs. And rs means r times s. And that's it. That's the answer. Now, if, let's say for whatever reason this came out as sr, again, in general in algebra, we like to have things in alphabetical order. So you should put these in alphabetical order. R comes before S, right? Q-R-S-T, yes. So that's in alphabetical order. So V equals RS would be your answer. So it's not so bad, right? Question? All right, so let's look at another one. This one says solve for M. So to get M by itself, I need to get rid of this V squared, and I need to get rid of this R. I'm going to show you how to do this in 2 steps, and then I'm going to show you how to do this in 1 step. So if these were numbers, so this is kind of helpful in literal equations, is to think about if the v squared was a number and the r was a number, what would I do first? Anybody know? No? So we're solving. Remember when we solved equations and it was a fraction like this, I said clear out the denominator first? So how would I clear out the denominator? How would I get rid of this r here? I would multiply both sides by r. Yes? No? So if I multiply both sides by r, so this time I'm showing you how to do this in 2 steps. So r times c, I'm going to change the order of that and write it as c times r. These r's will cross cancel each other out. So now I have c times r equals m times v squared. Good so far? How do I get rid of the v squared? Because I'm solving for m. So this is m times v squared. So what's the opposite of multiplication? So I divide both sides by v squared. V squared divided by v squared is what? It's not 0. It's 1. Anything divided by itself is equal to 1. 2 divided by 2 is 1. V squared divided by v squared is 1. Anything divided by itself is always equal to 1. So that just becomes 1m or m. Over here, I just leave this as c times r divided by v squared. But let's flip this around because this is how we like to do it in algebra. And that would be our final answer. So in some ways, this is actually easier than solving equations with numbers. Because am I actually dividing here? I'm not doing anything. I'm not multiplying. I'm not dividing. Do you need a calculator to do this? Do you need to know your multiplication tables? Do you need to know how to add and subtract? No. You just got to know how to move things around. So all you're doing is taking the puzzle pieces and moving them around to get things by themselves. Questions? Excellent. Oh, thank you. So I said I'd show you how to do this in 1 step. So let me show you that. So C equals mv squared divided by r. So to do it in 2 steps, I multiplied by r and divided by v squared, right? So to do that in 1 step, what I can do is multiply both sides by r over v squared. Put this over 1, r over v squared. These r's would cross cancel, the v squareds would cross cancel, and I would end up with the answer m equals c times r over v squared. So that's how you would do it in 1 step. Basically, I'm multiplying by the reciprocal, right? The reciprocal of v squared over r is r over v squared. And remember, if you take any fraction and multiply it by its reciprocal, it's always equal to what? 1. So any fraction multiplied by its reciprocal is 1. Some of you are in la la land. La la! I'm feeling better today, can you tell? I don't know, because they hate me. How are you, Ethan? Nice to see you. Just leave it on your desk, it's fine. All right, so example number 3, it says solve this for u. What should I do first? Multiply both sides by t. So clear out what's in the denominator here. Okay, so I'm going to multiply by t. So I'll multiply this side by t over 1. I'll multiply this side by t. Again, I'm going to change the order of these and write it as a times t. Putting them alphabetically. These t's will cross cancel because t over t is 1. Now I have this. A times t equals v minus u. So now I want to get rid of the v. Do I add v or subtract v? Raise your hand if you think I subtract v. Raise your hand if you think I add v. What does this minus sign belong to? The u. What's in front of the v? It's a positive. That's a positive v, so you want to subtract v. So now this gets to what I was talking about in the beginning that sounded confusing. What's AT minus V? Exactly. AT minus V is AT minus V. So you just write A times T minus V equals negative U. Well, kind of. Question so far? No. Unfortunately. So now I need to get rid of this minus sign. Anybody remember how to get rid of that minus sign? We did it when we... No, not addition. What's in front of the u that's not written? A 1. So this is really negative 1 times u, right? So divide both sides by negative 1. Negative 1 divided by negative 1 is positive 1. So now I'm going to flip this around, okay? U equals A times T minus V divided by negative 1. This is probably the hardest one we're going to do today, okay? She's so smart. What? Have you done this before? Huh? So, she said negative AT plus V. This can be simplified. Anything over 1 can be simplified, right? But we need to deal with this negative sign. So here's how you can think of this. This can be rewritten as negative AT over 1 minus V over negative 1. Let me put this negative sign down here because this will make more sense to you probably. So all I did was split this apart, right? So I put the negative 1 under the AT and the negative 1 under the V. This negative sign here, when you have a negative fraction, like 2/3, if I want to make this negative, I could write it like this. I could write it like this. Or I could write it like this. Those all mean the same thing. So this negative sign I can put up on the AT. And so that just becomes negative AT. Because anything over 1 is just equal to itself. What do two negatives make? A positive. So again, this is probably the trickiest one today. And so that simplifies to that. Another way of thinking about this is if you end up with an answer divided by -1, just transfer the negative sign up to the things in the top. So for instance, transfer the negative sign to the AT, that makes negative AT. Transfer it up to the V, and then remember a negative and a negative make a positive, and that's why that becomes plus V. Getting this, Rochelle? Osmosis. Questions? So again, you'll have a copy of this so you can review this. All right, last one. What the heck? Solve this for A. So, any thoughts on what? I'm sure someone's going to say distribute, right? Grace, what are you going to say? You could distribute, but there's an easier way to do it. An easier way. That would be like distributing, right? Taylor, what were you going to say? No, that's fine. Okay. You could do that. So here's the way that you want to handle this. How can I get rid of this n over 2? Multiply both sides by what? I want to get rid of this. How do I get rid of that? Multiply what? Close. Yes, multiply both sides by the reciprocal of that. So if I multiply both sides by the reciprocal, let me see if I can fit this over here. So we put this over 1. That's a 1, I swear. Times 2 over n. Over here, these will cross cancel each other out. 2 over 2 is 1, n over n is 1. And so what I end up with is 2s over n equals a plus 1. So did you follow what I did there? Let's say, so let's do this. Let me write this real quick with numbers. 4 equals 2/3 times x minus 1. So the way that we've been solving an equation like this is to distribute first, right? That's what I taught you to do. The other way you could solve this is to multiply both sides by the reciprocal of that fraction. So I'm just showing you the same thing but with numbers. And so this over here, this would be 6 over 6, which is 1, right? So that goes away. And over here I'd have 12 over 2, which is 6. And then I would just add 1 to both sides. So it's another way of doing this besides distributing. So when you have distributed property like this in a literal equation, what you want to do is multiply both sides by the reciprocal of whatever this is. And that will clear that out. Again, the more we do this, the easier it will be. because I've taught you like 4 or 5 different techniques here. It's hard to keep them straight. So how do I get rid of the plus 1? Because I'm solving for A, right? How do I get rid of that? Subtract it, right? Minus 1, minus 1. Over here I have 2s over n minus 1. So all I do is write 2s over n minus 1 equals A. Flip that around. And that would be your answer. It's confusing, right? A little bit. So here's what I did to try to make this less confusing and more helpful for you today. Well, let me pause.